Do it. Okay. All right. So, thank you. By the way, thank you for your introductions. Thank you for being, just being open about what makes you nervous about this kind of course, what makes you excited about this kind of class, taking the initiative and reading the syllabus prior to beginning. I definitely appreciate that. That goes a long way. And remember, you've done this before. That's the great thing about grad school. I did grad school for a long time. I have 2 master's degrees as well, and working on my dissertation now. So I've done this for quite a bit. And the great thing about it is that it's not having to completely relearn how to make a wheel, right? We are in courses. Yes, it's in Zoom. I so wish that we could all be together in Decatur. But as it stands right now, this is the way of the world. So with that being said, if you come upon any difficulties in this course, please don't hesitate to let me know. Whether they are technology, whether they are conceptual, whether they are just my communication strategy. Let me know if something's not working, because I definitely want to fix it. All right, so my email address is on the syllabus. You may have noticed in the original syllabus, I said, when possible, use the Canvas message system. The reason I prefer the Canvas message system is simply because that's where you're submitting your assignments. That's where your grades are going. It makes it easy to have everything in one place, right? That way I don't have to get out just to go read an email, come back in and maybe adjust the due date, right? However, for those of you who are not on at the very beginning, I tried to log in. I've been logged into the Canvas site for the entire week. And when I tried to sign in this afternoon at 3:30, I got this, okay? What that means is I can't read your messages, and I can't really get to the class at all for the moment. So I changed it. Just email me, okay, if you have any questions. This is my cell phone number, so calling and texting work. Feel free to reach out via that way as well. In fact, I have my phone on me at all times. I will ask you though, we are pretty old souls in this house, and we are generally not looking at our phones after 9 o'clock Central. And so, Kara, knowing you are now 2 hours behind, right? Okay. That means at 8 o'clock, it's only 6 o'clock there. Yeah, gosh. Yeah, I will keep my phone on me until 10. Is that okay?
You don't have to do that for me. I will not bother you at night.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. I'm committed to it. I'm committed to teaching, which means I'm committed to communicating with y'all as well as being reachable. So it's completely okay. I just wanted to make sure that if we had someone in Alaska, which we very well could, Ken, I have no idea what time it is in Taiwan. Can you educate us a little bit there?
Wait, I'm sorry. What is your question?
Oh, what time?
What time? I mean, I'm in Georgia right now, so.
Oh, you're in Georgia. Sorry, I thought maybe you were in Taiwan. Okay.
I mean, I'm from Taiwan, so.
Got it. Okay, cool. Okay, just making sure we were all on the same time zones. So nonetheless, I just prefer not to get texts and phone calls after 10 p.m. our time, which is 11 Eastern. That would be 8 o'clock Pacific. Is that feasible for everybody? Okay. And I hate to be kind of a downer about that, but it is, families and stuff like that are important too. So the only day of the week, which you should not expect to hear back from me in a timely fashion, is Friday evenings. Students last week heard the same spiel. I've been married for 3 years, but I still date my spouse. And every Friday is that time. So Friday afternoons, Friday evenings, we focus on our marriage, we focus on the family. We do not, neither of us, worry about anybody else. So just wanted to give you that message ahead of time. I will definitely respond early Saturday if anything comes in. In terms of office hours, I'm pretty flexible. These are the stated office hours in the syllabus because we have to schedule them out, right? I mean, we need to have standard times that you should expect to be able to reach me and me to be able to sit down and dedicate, a screen to walking through something via Zoom or talking out an issue. These are those times. Notice that one is right before class begins. The other one is the day before. But if you would like to schedule time, just let me know. Just let me know because I recognize work schedules may conflict. So just let me know when you're available, and if it's of course any other time other than Friday evening, definitely be able to do that. I stick to a 24-hour time frame. You will hear back from me probably within an hour, but 24 at the most. Has anybody had any troubles getting the textbooks for this course?
I think I rather have a Kindle, so was going to try the Kindle out and wondered if you had any opinion.
Oh, in terms of an electronic textbook versus the physical textbook?
Yeah, because I'm not sure how like visual heavy or table heavy the book is, but yeah, if you don't have an opinion, that's okay, but just curious.
Yeah, no, I've oops. I just logged out of Red Shelf not too long ago. So I have an electronic textbook for this class. I actually don't have the physical version, and I like it. Laura Beth, I think you're going to be fine. Just know that thing. I promise the password's not going to be right. There you go. I have this theory that if ever people are watching you type your password, you're going to mistype it. So there it is. Yep. So this is my on Red Shelf. So Red Shelf is a website that the book is also available in. It's very easy to see the screenshots or the images or the tables. Happy to pull that up real quick for you. Good question. And I believe it was Kara's point. Oh, there we go. So here's the table of contents. It allows you to go to where you need. If you haven't gotten the electronic version or the paper version, we should be okay for this week because I pretty much follow the text in my lecture. But here we go. So I think it's pretty easy to read, right? It does pretty good. I don't know what version of Kindle you have and how well it would look, but at least on a web browser, I don't have any issues with the textbook.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Now, Kara, you said something earlier about communicating in academic tone, right?
Yeah.
This one, this is the required materials because it really does go along with every lecture except for the qualitative stuff. But all of our quantitative discussion is going to be circled around this text. However, back in my very first master's degree, I discovered this resource. It's called From Numbers to Words. This is one of my favorite resources because it tells you exactly how to translate the output of statistical tests into academic lingo, right? This is one of my favorites. I'm not saying you don't have to get it at all, but you can also Google if you want to how to report a t-test or how to report multiple regression, right? But I did want to point out this reference. Also, Laura Beth talked about Tableau. Stephanie Evergreen, have you ever heard of her? She's pretty awesome. She's pretty awesome with data visualization. I'm going to bring in a couple of examples from her text. But if you're interested in pursuing data visualization techniques and those sorts of things, she's a pretty awesome resource too. So this course, if I had to describe this course in just a few words, it's going to be hands-on a little challenging, but also it's got everything I'm going to have you do in this class has a reason. Everything we're going to do from week to week has a purpose, and it does build on itself, but there's also segments that are a little bit standalone. I have tried, and you'll see this in the next in the scheduling. I've tried to create assignments that may be more interesting than just looking at one type of data for the entire class. If you ever have messed with the software called Tableau, they have a sample data set they call Superstore. Has anybody ever played around with that? It's basically like a market store, right? Like a shopping market. And so it's just a lot of sample data that they use in a lot of different ways. I'm going to give you data from the public domain and show you where to get it. So you can dig deeper, look further, learn more, explore. But I'm also going to ask you, essentially to think about data from sports, think about data from the healthcare field, think about flight data, think about art, think about museums, visits, think about costs, think about COVID, right? I'm going to help you think through any topic that is ever that you could be exposed to, because honestly, data is everywhere. So we're going to do this mainly in Microsoft Excel and SPSS with a lot of hands-on learning opportunities. The way we're going to do it, the how, are through lab assignments, which are essentially homework assignments. You will have discussion boards, and these discussions are going to be related back to something that we often overlook in the world of data analysis, but it helps us broaden our understanding both of techniques and of different types of content through reading actual published literature. So the idea of, I haven't done this whole academic speak thing in a while. Well, you're going to read it, and you're going to have to translate it in a couple of ways. So don't be afraid. I think you'll understand what I mean here in a little bit. There will be one project presentation where all of you will be put into groups. And so that comes much later in the semester. You do not have to worry about that right now. But you will see, feel free to go ahead and read about it. But we'll talk about it probably in a week or two. Probably not, of course, not next week, but maybe 2 or 3 class periods from now. We will have exams. I did get a student last year tell me that they have not had an exam their entire graduate career. For Juliana and Laura Beth, have y'all actually had a test in your career as you come up on your last semester?
No.
I haven't.
Cool. All right.
Actually, I didn't know I thought they were forbidden. So when I heard that your class had one, I actually went to go look at the catalog. This was last semester when I heard about your class, or last fall. And yeah, because not that I don't think they're helpful. I thought we were sort of a test-free program, but yeah, the catalog does not forbid that. I think it was just sort of the vibes I got, but I think they're helpful. Yeah.
No worries, no harm, no foul. Look, I think exams do a lot of things. One, they focus your mind. They focus your efforts. They do assess pretty well learning, and while I don't use them strictly in my own assessment of student learning, I use multiple measures. But what exams do are they clarify areas of weakness on me. And so when I see let's just say all 7 people in this class miss the same question on the exam, that gives me the opportunity to really figure out how to better teach it. And even though you may have missed the point, those exams are not going to break you. As you see here, 400 points in this class are dedicated to your weekly assignment, lab assignment. Another 180 are dedicated to the weekly discussions. You won't have one each week, by the way. You might have noticed that we're in this class for about 15 weeks. Only 8 weeks you'll have labs, only 9 you'll have discussion. They don't. You may have a week or several that you have both, but on weeks that you have exams, you do not have more than one assignment. I have tried to moderate that a little bit. Your project presentation is worth 10% of your final grade. In addition, your weekly participation, and what that means is not just talking in class, but of course, asking questions, being insightful, really participating, not just, of course, being present, but being fully present. That's 20 points. So there, even though the exams are 30%, really, I mean, a passing grade is very feasible, and you're more than likely to succeed in this course if you really focus on all of the other pieces. Because if you do everything else, the exam should not be that difficult, as long as, you know, we work through any questions you had. I use the same grading scale as Agnes got, of course, pluses and minuses. That should look pretty familiar. Attendance, what do we mean by that? This is, of course, coming to live meetings. I don't know if you watch the recorded sessions, but I expect for you to go back and look at them, right? If you have any questions. Then if you have any kind of asynchronous needs, like you know you're not gonna, like I know I'm not gonna be here next Thursday, right? I'll be on a plane. If that was me and I was a student, I would immediately tell the faculty member, you know, we've already planned out. By the way, my wife and I, we're going to Rhode Island for Labor Day. We always try to go somewhere colder at the end of the summer. We do not. We're tired of the heat here in Arkansas. So I would just ask that you communicate with me if you are unable to attend a session. That way, at least I know that you are cognizant of the fact that attendance is important. Like I said, all of our meetings will be in Zoom. And so did you get the link from Canvas, or did you get it from the syllabus? Which one did y'all click? I just want to make sure both work. Canvas, Laura Beth? I saw your mouth say Canvas. Okay. Kara said Canvas. Ken?
Email.
Email. Oh, good. Okay. All right. And Kara and Juliana? And Ratane?
I typed mine in manually because my computer was messing up. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's good. Ratane, what did you do? How did you find it?
I wrote email. I was having trouble getting into my Canvas, so I used my email. I copied and pasted it.
Gotcha. Yep, gotcha. Okay, good. Okay, so we understand, hopefully you all understand the world that we live in at this moment. The Delta variant has been really just disruptive, almost more so than the initial understanding of what COVID was. This syllabus is, of course, based on the most recent information about the course itself and the schedule as it is planned. If, let's just say, wife and I go to Rhode Island and I get really sick for whatever reason, even though I'll be masked up and we're both vaccinated, I want you to know that we can revise the syllabus as necessary. I will try my best not to do that because I want to provide you with a framework that you can rely on. But this is just a general disclaimer that I think every institution of higher learning is now using. So yeah. That's just the general disclaimer. So Netiquette, I've been teaching online since 2011. I also teach at a 4-year university in Mississippi, and I teach sociology to undergraduates there. So this is a big deal. Please make sure that we are all polite, understanding, and respectful of others as we interact with each other both online and Zoom, in person, or live, or if you're working in groups, communicating via email. Just make sure we respect everybody. and listen and fully understand kind of the opportunities that we have for learning here. Disability services are of course available through Agnes Scott, so the link is there. Most of you, especially the alums, are probably aware of the academic integrity and the honor system. So please, prevent plagiarism. Prevent any reason to go through that process. Title IX is as well very, very important. I am in discussions with our legal team at the system office because Title IX as of right now is being reviewed now that we have a new administration, as is pretty typical. But if for any reason you find that sexual harassment, violence, dating, or domestic violence or stalking in any form has occurred, or that you have been a witness to any such act, please reach out to me or any other faculty or staff member. We are, approved contacts for the institution, and through that process, we are committed to seeing that those instances, those occurrences, those issues are resolved quickly. So just wanted to make sure you knew that. And then any accommodations that may be necessary for anyone in this course, of course, we will do our best to meet those and make them. So please make sure you contact that office as well. I don't know why I lost, there it is, why it decided to go away, but there's the next part. In terms of inclusion, if I do try to make efforts to make sure I know how to pronounce names correctly, if there's anything else I need to know, please reach out and let me know. I'm happy to I want to make everyone feel as comfortable as possible. We're going to be on the phone for about 3 hours every week, so make sure we understand, kind of what I can do to make this a pleasant experience as well as a learning experience. In terms of course evaluations, it should not surprise you that a guy who works in higher education data really, really makes the course evaluations a priority. And I do. So it's very, very valuable to me. I have used the feedback from last semesters and the previous years of students that I've taught to always try to improve and go beyond expectations. So please, whenever you're given a chance to evaluate the course, the faculty member, whether it's me or anybody else, please take the time to do that because it is definitely integral to our improvement. All right, here we go. This week, this is, of course, our introduction. If you had the book so far, I hope that you at least started reading chapter 1. I sent you, or at least you see in Canvas, a link to a course survey. That course survey is open until next Tuesday. By the way, due dates. Nobody has asked me about due dates yet. I'm sure it was probably coming. Because this course is Thursday evenings even, I like to do in-class hands-on demonstrations and learning. I don't expect for you to turn around a homework assignment, a lab assignment, or a discussion by Sunday. So the due dates for this course will all be on Tuesdays. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. The reason I'm saying Tuesdays and not Wednesdays is because I like to look over and provide feedback and grades before class in case you have any questions. So Tuesdays are what I thought was the most flexible and helpful. I understand that, some people also don't have opportunities. They work on weekends. I once had a student who was a bartender, and that was their busiest time. So I felt like Tuesdays with one day of cushion in between would be best. So normally in week 2, which is next week that we won't be meeting, we would then be discussing measures of central tendency and using Excel. This, using flight data, is going to be your lab assignment. Tonight, I'm going to demonstrate very similar techniques using COVID data. And also your first discussion. are going to be assigned or available to you. Those are both, of course, due now because it's a Tuesday on September 7th. So you'll see all of that in Canvas if you haven't already. Next, we're going to move into data distributions, how to talk about the data and how they are grouped together. And we're really going to do all of this in Excel. We're going to kind of walk you into the course using Excel and then move into SPSS. That way, you're at least comfortable and confident with some of the broader data topics before we just, like you said earlier, I don't want to just show you one thing into SPSS and let you expect for you to figure it all out. We're going to spend an entire class day talking about SPSS. In fact, one of your discussion assignments is going to be comparing how to do things in Excel, SPSS, or just the regular old internet. Chapter 5 and week 5 are going to be our week to discuss data visualization. So we're going to do examples of that in both Excel and SPSS. And because it's visualization, we're going to use art data to talk about charting data. So forgive the puns that are inherent in some of my assignments, like bias, not bias, right? These are not intended to be funny, but I tried. So week 6 is all about statistical bias and how we can find it, and how people lie with statistics. 7, we're going to talk about non-parametric statistics, and if you have no idea what that means, don't worry, we'll get there. Week 8 is correlation. Week 9 is linear modeling. And what we mean by that is predictive modeling, predictive analytics. That's going to be your introduction to this. We're going to actually spend 2 weeks on it. Then we're going to talk about comparing groups. And then we're going to get close to the end of the course with our qualitative data analysis. This is not purely a quantitative course. Has anybody here already taken survey design or data collection? Okay. Data collection focuses much more on qualitative data, but I felt the need to touch on it and spend 2 weeks talking about the methods and then talking about the analysis. And then our last week will be a recap review. I'm going to ask you to be critical in your reflection. And then, of course, the final exam, which is not, let me go ahead and tell you right now, the final exam is not comprehensive. It is only over the information presented since the previous exam, right? So go ahead and know each exam is standalone, okay? Cool. Y'all, that's a lot to take in. I've talked for a good bit. What questions do you have about anything in the syllabus or any way that I'm structuring the class, grading, assignments, etc.?
I did have a question. So this is like a little bit of an embarrassing question. I haven't taken a test in a very long time. So will we know in advance like certain areas that you would like us to focus more on before the exam? Or is it just going to be, you know, like study what we've done and, you know, you'll do fine?
Both. No, I'm joking. Julianne, that's a fair question. That's a very fair question. I will I will make it a point, at least the week before the exam, to focus in and at least take time to discuss, this is what you really need to focus on with the exam. I won't necessarily tell you exactly what terms, for example, you'll need to know. You should know those because we'll talk about them. But what I will say is that you will analyze, I'm going to expect you to analyze some data, right, during the test. I'm going to give you plenty of time to take the test, by the way. There will be a portion, I believe, and don't hold me to this right now because it's week 1. For the first test, I can't remember exactly what I put on that test, but I know that there was a small data analysis portion. The majority of the test was multiple choice, a little bit of data entry, just because that's one of the only ways to check your knowledge as to whether or not you get the right answer for what the average is, for example. But in terms of content, yes, we will do that. I will give you a brief overview of content related back to the exam, as well as the structure of the exam. So I'm going to give you more than what you just asked for. I hope that's okay.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Because I'll be honest, I've been in your shoes, in all of your shoes. And I remember hearing students in the class say, can you tell us what's on the exam? And the professor would kind of be, a little vague, but generally helpful. But no one ever asked, how will we take the exam? And all of a sudden, like, we would walk in and we'd have a flash drive on our desk. And they'd say, oh yeah, that's the second half of your exam, is all that data. And all of a sudden people are like, I was not ready to open Excel for this test, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm going to tell you if you're going to have to, use any type of software for the exam. Good question. What else? What other questions do you have?
I have a second question about the assignments. They're locked, and that's cool. I think that's good for us to pace ourselves. But I was curious if there are rubrics. Some of my other classes use rubrics, and I think they're pretty helpful.
Yeah. Are you talking about for the test or for the assignments?
For the assignments, yeah, and I guess the labs.
Oh, look, gosh darn it, Laura Beth. If only I could get in Canvas right now, right? Can y'all, are any of you in Canvas right now?
I'm in Canvas,
yeah.
but it's.
Oh, Laura, okay. Yeah.
Do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, if you don't mind, and that
Sure.
way I can kind of. Well, actually, you know what? Because of the date, I don't know if you can click on it or not. We'll try. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're all grayed out for me, but
Well, I'll tell you what. That those assignments, for example, they do have specific point values for specific things. Yes, and they are all listed for every assignment. Yes, ma'am.
That's so good to hear, because it's sometimes really hard to know if you're doing the right thing, and a lot of us are, we're in this program where we want to succeed, and so I appreciate that, so we can at least get some footing there.
No problem. In fact, I just remembered that I have my folder open. So here we go. Lab assignment 1, right? This is your first lab assignment. The same thing is in Canvas now. I'm going to provide you with data for commercial flights using the functions in Excel, median and mode for flight. Basically, I lay out, exactly what I want you to do. And then for learning outcomes and points available, you see this 5, 10, 5, 10, 5, 5, 5, 5. That totals up to 50. And so basically what will happen is you will either get all, partial, or none, depending on how the response is provided, right? And I'll explain as I review them. But definitely, it's not you have to get everything right to get everything right. It's definitely more. I take more time and effort to make sure I'm grading everything according to this list. Does that make sense, y'all? And I'm sorry, I again can't get into Canvas, but at least I have this one available. Okay. What other questions do you have?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So how do we do we submit our assignment on Canvas as well, or we can use?
Yes.
Okay.
Only on Canvas. I prefer, unless Canvas is for some reason shut down, then I would say, I'll send a message out to everybody, please email me, but Canvas is the only way to submit assignments. There is your project presentation. I will ask you to send me your presentations, right? separately, just because you'll only have one presentation, even though it'll be a group of people. So don't worry about that again right now. But everyone will be submitting their own assignments separately. I was asked in a prior section about working together, which even though, of course, many of y'all are not maybe next door neighbors, if you would like to work together, I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to stop you from building working relationships with your colleagues, with your fellow students. However, if I receive 2 submissions that are extremely similar, then I have the right to question whether or not there's really independent thinking. But oftentimes I've found students do work well together in this class because they can talk through how, because a lot of I'll be honest, Joe, a lot of this class is related to asking, how do I do this, right? A little bit's conceptual, or a lot of it's conceptual, but it's not, in a normal history class, I would expect everybody to have different perspectives to some degree, but this class, a lot of it is methodology. So if you do work together, even though you didn't ask this question, I definitely expect different levels of submission, different viewpoints, different feedback. But I'm not going to preclude you from working together to work through the assignment itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that in the fall summer semester in the modeling and simulation for Insight, we did have to group work a lot in that class, and a good way for us to make sure we didn't copy each other was to never share files, but you could share screens, and that seemed like a pretty easy way to kind of manage that individual thinking. We might, I don't know if we'll use discussion board or something, but I hope we also have our own Zoom account. I think we do. And maybe that'll be.
No, that's good. That's a good point. Yeah, I like that. I like that. For me, it is, just I'm not so. I'm pretty old, y'all. But I'm not so old to assume that students don't work together. And in a way, I want you to. I'm not going to require it by any means, but if you work well together, you work well together. That is probably one of the latent functions of school, right? You learn how to work with other people to get things done. So yeah, feel free to connect with each other outside of class. In fact, feel free to bring me in either in office hours with whoever, the whole group, individually, it doesn't matter. But just keep me posted on what y'all need. Any other questions about the syllabus? Okay. Well, look, we are at 42 after on my watch. Why don't we take 10? And then we'll come back and start lecture number 1, so to speak. Since I won't be here next week, we'll go ahead and move on into that and get as far as we can through it. And then we'll do some data analysis and then answer any further questions you might have. But let's take, well now, gosh, it's 43 after. Let's take 10. I'll see you back here at 53 after. All right. All right. Can everybody hear me? Good deal. Good deal. All right. So let us give it a go. The first thing I want you to know, and I mentioned this a little bit ago, is that in our world, more so now than ever before, data really are everywhere. You could probably, if you looked hard enough, you might be able to find data on any number of things. And I want to start with this slide specifically, simply because
We
oh, you don't see it, do you?
right. We
There you
see.
go.
Thanks.
That's it. Thank you. The demand for people who know how to use and analyze and interpret data has just skyrocketed. I don't see that going away, even if we have continual development of artificial intelligence. We still need people in every sector that can help us do better, right? Learn more, understand things. In fact, I think that's probably my most, the compliment that I receive the most in my work is either, wow, I never knew we could do that, or two, gosh, you make it, you explain it so well, right? So really understanding and communicating is really probably the two of the biggest things that I think we're challenged with right now. So I've got just on this slide, and you'll have access to download slides from Canvas as well. On the slide, I've got some of the bigger data hubs that really are probably most used by people. Has anyone on this course, have any of y'all gone out to like explored data.gov, GitHub, Google, World Bank, or the WHO?
GitHub.
Gitmo, what have you done on GitHub, Ken?
I work with others to finish a project by using GitHub. Yeah.
Cool. What excuse me. What was the project?
The project is COVID cases VAs versus crime. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We're actually, I don't know if we're going to use the same GitHub COVID data that you're referring to, but actually GitHub is where I got and continue to get all of my COVID data. So that's cool. Does anybody have their favorite data website that they may have used for something else? It's like everybody has their favorite mask, right? You never thought you'd have your favorite face mask, but we do, right? We should all wear our favorite face mask one day. But yeah, I've got my favorite data sites. In fact, I'm going to put out into Canvas this. So I've compiled this over time. This does change. But I know we've got a lot of people here that are concerned about local food sources and farmers markets. I'm joking. You may or may not, right? But guess what? There is a source for that. I told you before, I am a huge advocate for and supporter of the arts. There's data for that. There's communication, crime, earth, climate, economy, education, elections, energy, environment, government, health, housing, labor, population, sports, transportation. And then we get into those bigger open data reservoirs like I just showed you. After that, more and more now with state, local governments, we have open data archives and access by states. So here's Georgia's, open.georgia.gov. Oregon has data.oregon.gov. I mean, it is generally expected that state entities, because taxpayers like us support efforts by the states or by the city, that data is also available. So even Little Rock has quite a bit of open source data, dealing with crime, dealing with things that people are interested in looking at. There's Atlanta. Anyway, this goes beyond just national. It also includes international. So I hate to say it. Let me do a quick search here, Caitlin. I do not have anything for Taiwan. I'll have to go out and check and look around. Do you know of any?
No. I'll probably have to look up too.
There you go. Well, hey, if anyone's interested in Montpelier or New South Wales, right? I mean, it's just, there is so much out there. You just don't know what you don't know until you dig in. So the reason I'm going to give this to you now, early in the semester, is for twofold. One, I want you to start to get comfortable with what's out there in the public data domain. There it is. Thank you, Kara. She just put it in the chat. I want you to get comfortable with what's out there in the public data domain. If you don't understand what and how it's collected and produced, then you're probably not going to analyze it correctly. Does that make sense? A lot of times our data, the way that we collect it, dictates how we analyze it. And unfortunately, that's just the way of the world as well. You might find people that say they have open data and it's all in PDFs, and it's not very usable. But nonetheless, the other reason why I wanted to provide this to you now is because your project presentation will be letting you choose your own adventure, so to speak. You will go out and find your own data, right? I'm not saying you have to use any of these sites. You are more than welcome to use data that is relevant to your job, as long as there's no restrictions that you use it. You can use data that you've already got collected, that you collected yourself. I don't want you to necessarily go out and do data collection, because that's not this course, okay? But I definitely wanted to provide you with plenty of resources for open access to data early in the semester, because if you want to learn and explore and prepare for your project, but also just learn more about what's out there. All of my other students have said that they started to get really interested in some things because of it being on this list. So anyhow, there's that. I'll make sure you all have access to that as soon as I have access back in Canvas. So why do we need this course? Why do we need this course? And feel free to unmute and give me your reasons why you need the course, but just, go beyond my reasons, right? Go beyond my reasons. Why do we need to know how to analyze data?
So we can make decisions based on something almost neutral, like it's not biased. Well, we hope it's not biased, and we hope it's not emotionally charged, and it's something that's maybe neutral to all like decision making parties.
Yeah, I teach a series of workshops for a trade association, like a national trade association, and one of them talks about survey design. And one of the best questions I've ever seen on the survey is it's related to instructors, and it says, tell us about basically the statement was, my instructor was responsive to my questions, and then without missing a beat, it says, now remember, he's teaching 5 sections or something like that. And I was just like, okay, that's a little biased, right? That's a little biased. Just telling me to back off whenever I'm trying to evaluate somebody. But you're exactly right, Lord Beth. The idea of using data that we consider to be neutral, just simply expressing the facts, right? Like putting facts behind our understanding, and again, building on knowledge that we definitely didn't know beforehand. One of the things that I try to balance, and I'll give you this advice early on as well, is while I hear a lot of people say that we are data driven, we let data drive our decision making, let me go ahead and squash that for you. I don't want data to drive my decision making, because then I'm probably not making the best decision. Similarly, if I purely use my gut instinct, number one, I didn't eat lunch, so my gut's empty. You don't want me making a decision right now, right? If I didn't sleep well last night, you definitely don't want me making a decision until I've had coffee. But the fact of the matter is relying too heavily on either ends of those spectrums, that spectrum right there, that kind of intuition, data, if we do too much of it, using data alone is always going to be limited. No matter how many websites we go to, right? We will never understand the full story behind farmers markets, right? No matter how many interviews we do, we will never understand the plight of the farmer, right? The market availability. And I'm just picking on farmers markets. But what we do know is that we can base it on our own experiences, or balance it rather, with our own experiences, our own interactions with other people, and at least have both sides of that coin help inform our decisions, right? And so I hear a lot of, I sit in a lot of vice presidents, directors, and presidents interviews, because we're at the system office. We're kind of involved in that. Every time I hear someone say data driven, I cringe. I'm like, I'm the data guy, and I know you're trying to speak to me, but gosh darn it, don't let data drive it. Like we've got it. You've got to know the culture of your organization, right? You know, even on the micro level, I'm married. I have a lot of data because I look at my balance, my checkbook, right? I know what I spend money on. I know what my spouse spends money on. And so I know how much we're probably going to spend on Christmas or all the other birthdays and holidays. But yet I can tell my spouse, we need to cut back because we've got this trip coming up. It's not going to make a bit of difference, because I know in my gut, we're still going to have a culture of gift giving, right? We have a large family on both sides. It's even using data to help drive our decisions doesn't always work. And it doesn't work in business, and it doesn't work in healthcare, and it doesn't work in education. So balancing data information with our gut, with our culture, with our people, is really kind of my, gosh, I just gave you my big finale for the entire course in the first lecture. So, but no, I'm serious. Like thinking about it like that, right? Answering questions, but using all available resources. Why else do we need to know how to analyze data?
This is not this is not a large scale answer by any stretch of the imagination. One of the things that I'm really fascinated by is the way people take in data and analyze it and then use it for understanding themselves better and why they do what they do and how they move forward. So I guess maybe what I'm addressing is the idea of analyzing data as a means for personal growth and direction.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I like to call that the Fitbit focus, right? And I'm not saying like anybody, like not you, not anybody, but for I don't have a Fitbit, I have a Casio. But think about everyone who wears a Fitbit, right? They are in some way, shape, or form, people who pay attention to all the data that it collects, your heart rate, your calories, your steps, your stairs, mileage, all that kind of stuff. They are using data to better themselves, right? Or at least be aware of themselves, right? And that is something that many companies are starting to capitalize on. Think about Apple iPhone, think about Samsung, right? The more that they integrate at least self-actualization, right, Kara? Is that a good word for it? maybe leading to self-improvement. Yeah, and honestly, you know, I thought you were going to go a different direction when you started your response. I thought you were going to talk about pulling back the curtain and seeing the wizard behind there, right? And understanding like all people who are able to do all this stuff, like seeing really kind of the nitty gritty behind it, right? It's not very attractive. I got to tell you, it's a lot of code sometimes, but go ahead. What do you want to add?
No, I'm also fat. Yes, that separate category. Also, yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, I find that it's important to realize that when we do pull back that curtain, it can be frustrating. Because what if all we had for, again, our farmers markets were the farmers who came at the very onset of the season, right? We have to think about all the limitations that come with the data that we use. And so that's just one example, but you know, definitely many more. Juliana, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's important, and we need to know how to analyze data so that we can translate it to other people. I know you touched on that a little bit, and it was in, you know, our first assignment, like explain how you would say this, like at the dinner table. I think being able to analyze data is important so that like the quote unquote average person understands, you know, the numbers of it all.
Yeah, and Juliana, you went ahead and just hit on, you know, one of your first lab assignments. And honestly, let me go ahead and put your fears aside. Yes, you're going to describe your analysis as if you're presenting them at a conference and as if you're talking to your family for every assignment. Okay? Let me go ahead and either scare you or put your fears aside. The reason why that is the case is because, where were we up here? Oh yeah, there it is. SLO, boom. Number 4, communicate to a variety of audiences. That is not purely academic. That is not how I intended you to basically interpret that. But what I want you to do, and I'm serious, call your family, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, whatever, and say, hey, I'm doing this assignment for class. If I explain this to you, if I say this to you, doesn't make sense. I'm not kidding. Like, because when you are, let's just say you are going to work, for example, or talking to your boss. I have a president of a university system. His time is pretty limited. And so when he and I are talking, sometimes it's in the elevator to leave work. I've got to have an elevator speech ready at the drop of the hat, right? But yeah, no, that's a perfect example, right? We need to be able to understand and interpret all of what is going on. Good. Any other ideas or thoughts? Right. Well, it goes without saying that in order to fully understand the importance of data and the usefulness of it, we've really got to understand the research process. So let's take it back to 7th grade, 8th grade, and talk about what we call the scientific method, right? Remember that? I mean, I don't remember all of the specifics, but nonetheless, data is inherent in the research process, and more than just, oh, we're going to generate hypotheses and then collect data. Oftentimes, our initial observations are driven by this data that we may or may not realize is even there. So typically the way this works is you have some sort of experience. And then that experience then develops into some sort of theory, and we can then hypothesize why, like some sort of phenomenon essentially is happening. And that hypothesis allows us to say, you know, X, Y, and Z causes W, or X, Y, and Z does not cause W, right? Then the data that we collect either confirm or help us understand that it does not have that kind of relationship. And so data is definitely part of this broader research process. this is not a research methods course either, but it's important that you understand the research method that is, I hate to say it, pretty academic, but because it is a firm way of knowing what we know is true, right? Because if I just go out there and collect data ad hoc, let me ask you this. If I asked each of you how many hours of sleep you got last night, and then I just said, I did a study of Agnes Scott students, and I found out that they, on average, got about, 2.5 hours of sleep, right? Well, one of our students has a very young child, right? They could definitely skew the average, which we'll talk about skewiness in a second. But what if I summarized out to our entire population of students based on just you? Is that right? No, it's definitely not right. So that's why we need to always keep in mind that there is a research process. We should follow it when applicable, but also recognize that data analysis itself is, and oftentimes, a business function, right? It's a business function. I get asked every week to provide, basically, I track all of our institutions' enrollment. That's just one of the small tasks that I do. It doesn't take very long. But what it does do is it gives confidence to our finance officers for the budget. It gives confidence to our academic officers for our faculty that they're hiring, right? It does a lot of things. And so it's important that this work be done. What theory and what theory is driving this, right? There really isn't theory here, but it's nonetheless a very valuable part of kind of what we do in terms of data management, data analysis, which, by the way, last year at this time, our system of institutions had about 22,800, not 21,000 students. Now 22,800. Now we've got almost 24,000. So we're actually a little bit up. I'm shocked because we're in the Delta variant stage. I thought enrollment would start to flatten out. But again, this is what I would say is one example of something you may do one day that is not driven by theory, but yet important to understand the role that data has both in the theoretical world as well as in the applied world. So in terms of initial observations, you saw this very first step being initial observation. Why don't y'all tell me some examples of some initial observations of things that you find that you, if you could, that you would want to research or do a little bit more research and analysis on?
We are planning on building a home, not now, but
Awesome.
like in the next decade, and we want it to be sustainable. So probably I guess I'm interested in what sort of features we could add to a house, like solar panels or extra insulation, and what sort of, I guess, return they have long term.
Oh, So have you, automatically, Laura Beth, you told me that you are basing this off of some data, even though you don't really know exactly what those values are. You're making a hypothesis that a sustainable home has a return on investment, both probably initially and long term, right? And probably even a third stage, which is resale value. So yeah, there's definitely some sort of underlying information there that's based on data. It sounds like very cool. And good luck on the home buying. My wife and I decided not to even build a fence around our yard because of the price of lumber. I couldn't imagine building a whole house right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Anybody else have some?
Decade, 2-decade goal, but I'd love to explore that in this class.
Yeah, cool. I will send you an email. I actually have it in my email, I think right now. I don't think I've taken it out, about Zillow. Has anybody heard of Zillow? You've heard of Zillow? I like to Zillow scroll. It's like, oh, too bad. Here we go. Boom. To get out there and connect to the Zillow database. So I'll send you that, Laura, but I'll send it to everybody if y'all want it. But just know that home prices are insane right now. All right, another example. What's an initial observation you've had that if you had the data, you would, want to look more into some sort of idea?
I've noticed that people are reluctant to change their opinions. And I would be fascinated to have some kind of a data perspective on what things motivate someone or give them the internal permission to look at different opinions or take a step out of their very specific entrenched spots. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, it's very psychological, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen opinion research polls where they track people over time and watch them become different as they age, generally?
No, but now I'm going to look for that.
Ooh, I only say that because this is what I know. I'm a sociologist, but I'm not a psychologist, but I dabble. But Kara, you are again making like more bet, right? There's something out there that's the problem. This is a little different take on it, right? You've identified the problem, and you're wondering, is there data out there that we can better understand what causes or what may be associated with changing of perspectives or changing of behavior or other observations. The data behind your initial observation seems to be not what we call variables, things that change, but what we call constants, variables that don't change, right? Thinking about someone, think about politics, right? Politics is an easy thing to pick on. If someone calls my neighbor and asks them, who you're going to vote for, they may say the same political affiliation every time because that's a constant in their life. What would it be though that would shift them from saying that one affiliation to another one day, if that did happen, right? Is that kind of what I'm saying? Like what are the factors that go into those sorts of major mindset changes? Very cool. Very cool. Anybody else? One more example, and then we'll move on. What's an initial observation that maybe you had today? It's so freaking hot. I wish it would stop. Go ahead, Julianne. Sorry to interrupt.
I do agree with that. It's very hot. I can barely take my around the cul-de-sac without, sweating, having to change my all that. But something that I'm really interested, I said it before, is maternal health, Black maternal, and seeing that the number has not changed in the past 2 decades is like what's coming off the top of my head, but it's been, decades and decades that the percentage of Black women that are dying in relation to white women has not changed, and it's been a constant. So that's something that I would want to look at and see, why has it not decreased? Why has that, percentage not decreased over time with all the healthcare, advancements and things like that?
Yeah, no, good. Back whenever I was working on my first master's, I did a small research project on infant mortality in the Mississippi Delta, which is, of course, not maternal health, but it can be impacted by maternal health. It sounds like your thinking is based around trends that exist, right? So definitely your initial observations seem to be based on a lot of data that's been collected already. Right? Can you agree with that, Julianne?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is how the human brain works, right? We look for things that intrigue us, whether they be historical studies, whether they be processes or procedures or opportunities that we want to take advantage of, like building a house, right? But then all of a sudden we think about that process and we realize, oh my gosh, there's a slew of data that either we don't have or we have, or it doesn't exist, that could really inform this process. And then, like Kara said, it's just having a really kind of going into the unknown. But gosh, data is going to be a big part of really figuring out what that unknown may be in terms of people changing their mindsets. So great examples, y'all. Great examples. When we talk about, again, variables, we have to use them typically in a more traditional research fashion to develop our theory. And what we mean by theory is essentially an explanation that is substantiated by both repeated testing and accurate testing. We're going to talk a little bit about reliability and validity in a few slides. But the idea of theory is usually based on some sort of broad phenomenon. We may be able to construct a theory about left-handed redheads, which if you haven't noticed already, I'm a left-handed redhead. I'm going to use myself as an example in this entire course. I'm a rare breed, y'all. So if we try to construct a theory about left-handed redheads, it may only be applicable to 0.1% of the population, right? Typically, when we theorize, that's much more of a broader audience. And we can then use our results to make changes to X, Y, and Z, right? The idea of variables, and I mentioned this with Kara's example, was, constants are those that do not change, but you're going to hear me talk a lot about variables in this class. So when we say something is independent, an independent variable, this is what we call the predictor, right? When we change the temperature of the world, the sale of ice cream goes up. Can we all agree to that, especially right now? Well, when it gets warmer outside, ice cream goes up. That's just one of those traditional independent variables. Ice cream sales are typically lower in colder months. The dependent variable in that sentence is the specific outcome that is affected by the predictor / independent variable. The predictor, again, is the temperature. The outcome is ice cream sales, okay? So you're going to hear me interchangeably call these things dependent variables, outcomes, independent variables, predictors. But those are essentially what we're going to be talking about week in and week out in this course. And so when we think about hypotheses, those are a proposed explanation that would fit a fairly narrow set of phenomena. A theory is generally much more broad, right? Like theory of human consumption, right? Human consumption is one of those things that does not change very much. Human beings are raised, and like we talked about before, like early childhood development, what the world that a child is born into and raised in typically informs their consumption as an adult, and how they then pass along those ideas and beliefs to their children. So that is a theory, right? That is a very broad theory. It can be applicable to many, many types of people. A hypothesis is usually much more narrow, and it typically focuses on one specific set of observations. Like in America, not broadly. I mean, still pretty broad, but maybe in the southern U.S., consumption in urban areas like Atlanta is higher than in rural areas like many of the communities that I used to live in Mississippi, right? So we're specifically talking about narrow types of comparisons, narrow types of measurements when we talk about our hypotheses. In order to collect data, and you heard me say this at the very beginning of class, we have different types of measurement. And you may remember I said, depending on how we want to analyze data is dependent generally on how we collect it, right? So if I asked all of you, what was your undergraduate GPA? I don't know if you remember it or not. I remember mine only because it was pretty paltry. It was pretty not the best. Definitely didn't graduate with honors, but I graduated. But generally, people know somewhat those sorts of things, right? I could ask you that question in a couple of ways. I could ask you to either input the answer, right? Type it out. And that would be a continuous variable, which we'll talk about here in a second. Or I could ask you to select a range, right? Like mine, between 2 and 3. And that, or 2.5, 2 to 2.5, 2.51 to 2.99, right? 3 to 3.49, etc. The way we collect the data, the different levels of measurement that we select from dictate how we can analyze it. And so, for example, nominal, what we mean by nominal data are essentially classifications. Essentially, we are applying a category to someone or something or some outcome. Nominal data are things like race, sexual identity, gender identity, ethnicity, what your major is, right? If your program is technology leadership, right? That is a nominal attribution. Binary is essentially just one or the other. We do have binary nominal data. Either people are, I hate to say it, like either they're alive or they're dead, right? People in general. That's just one example. Data has moved beyond general binaries over the last 10, 20 years, more so, because just the general society has started to go beyond the binary of things like sex, right? Sex and gender. And so what we're seeing is more of a focus on nominal level data. When we talk about ordinal data, remember nominal is just categories that are assigned to an observation or, a person, that sort of thing. Ordinal data has the same type of labels, but there is what we call a defined order. If you asked me to order in a meaningful way, race and ethnicity, for example, there is no meaningful order without data to inform it, right? You could order race ethnicity by the proportion of your population, and you might see Hispanic rise to the top, or Black African American rise to the top, or white rise to the top. But that is because it's informed by the data itself. The natural order of majors, the natural order of gender, sex identity, race, ethnicity, all of those types of categories, there is no real order to them, right? They are nominal. They are specifically a label. When we talk about ordinal data, we are talking about data that does have a natural order, like my face is here on the screen. This is my favorite way of surveying children, by the way. I did survey school kids about a after-school program that they participated in, and I asked them, did they enjoy the lesson that day? They didn't necessarily know what 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 meant. I didn't want to make the assumption that they were at the third grade reading level, like most of our surveys are written, because they were kindergartners. So what do we use? Faces, right? You just use happy, sad, whatever faces. But you can see from this scale that the big smile, medium smile, sort of frown, right? That is the natural order of emotion that many people understand, right? Similarly, we have strongly disagree, moderately disagree, neutral, strongly agree, all of that. We have a lot of what are called Likert scales. And I've got a document that I'm also going to share with you that includes a ton of Likert scale items. But nonetheless, these data have a little bit more detail than nominal because you can naturally order them, right? Now, let me ask you this. How many people think hurts a little more, the little straight face, how many people think hurts a little more means it hurts 4 times or twice as much as hurts a little bit? Does that make sense if I say it like that? So if it hurts a little bit, does that mean it hurts half as much as if it would hurt a little bit more? I bet you I can ask Ken, Juliana, Ratane, Laura Beth, and Kara all to rate the same, you remember those hammers that you used to get hit on your knee with for your reflexes? I bet if the doctor did the same pressure, the same thing to all of you, you might rate it differently, right? I'm a little bit of a wuss. I'm probably gonna say it hurts. I do run for a hobby, and I have hurt my knee. So if you do ever come at me with a hammer on my knee, I will probably not be happy. But nonetheless, you see what I'm saying? The ability for people to respond to ordinal data and rank order things doesn't imply that the rating is the same, right? So Laura Beth could say it hurts a little bit. Rodney could say it hurts a little more, right? What matters here is that there is a defined order, but the distance between 2 and 4 is not defined, right? We do not have a clear definition of what it means to be 2 versus what it means to be 4. In order to do that, we have to understand continuous data. What we mean by continuous is that there is a continual spectrum, and the distances between each value is defined. Think about your temperature. If you have a 98.2 temperature and I have a 98.4 temperature, what's the difference? 0.2, right? Exactly, 0.2. So what we mean by that is 0.1 degree or 2.1 degrees difference, right? If we have a student who is 23 years old and another student who is 46 years old, that student that is 46 is twice as old as the 23-year-old, right? 2 times. Before in the ordinal, remember, we couldn't say the same thing about hurts a little more versus hurts a little bit. We can't do that. That being the case, we can definitely average ordinal data. We cannot average nominal data. Don't ever try to average anything as a label, right? The average measure is not, data analysis. The average, there's no way of figuring that out. We can average ordinal data, we can rank order it, we can do frequency analysis, that sort of thing. When it comes to continuous data, we can average it. We can do much more. We can use it in many different ways. This is the highest level order of data. So remember how earlier I asked you if you remembered what your undergraduate GPA was? If you remembered your undergraduate GPA, it's actually ratio data. And the reason why it's ratio data is because it has a true 0. You can have a 0 GPA. I hope to God none of you ever had a 0 GPA. But you can have a 0 GPA. You can also have 0 years of life. Can you have a 0 temperature? No, go ahead, Laura Beth. Go ahead, push back.
Well, you would be dead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you would have zero life. No, yeah. The temperature is one of those things that is not. Okay, let's do this instead, because temperature, while it doesn't have a true zero, it's hard for people to consider. Did anybody take the ACT or the SAT? Yeah. Has anybody ever scored a zero on that test or those tests? No, there is no zero. There is no zero. Same thing with IQ tests, no zero. If you can take the test, you have an IQ of like, I don't know, 14 or something like that. I think the lowest I've ever seen ACT give me a test score on somebody was 7. So it's one of those things that those data do not have a true zero. And so we can't treat them like they are comparable to data that has zero. Let's then talk a little bit about what we mean by measurement error. Remember how earlier when we were just mentioning research studies, this is another aspect of formal research that is very important. I expect for you to know this, but I promise you, we are not going to spend a lot of our time doing measurement error in this class, because much more of what we're going to do is more applied work. Because honestly, you're probably going to do more applied work in your life, except for a future doctor, right? Future doctor is gonna have to do probably a lot of dissertation analysis. When we talk about validity, what validity means, y'all, is, are we measuring accurately? Are we actually measuring let's just say we were interested in maternal health, right? And so what do we measure when we measure maternal health? Juliana, you want to tell us what we measure? What are some indicators of maternal health?
Well, mortality rate after giving birth is one major thing that's measured. Types of prenatal care, blood pressure. There are a lot of other things, but those are just some like big ones that people really look at.
Yeah. So perfect. I was gonna throw out hypertension, high blood pressure, but I was like, oh, I don't want to sound stupid if I say that. And she's like, no, not. But I thought I remember reading something about hypertension. It is very important to watch in maternal, prenatal, postnatal. So what if we were measuring blood pressure in a group of women in our study, and our blood pressure machine was not calibrated correctly? What if it was not calibrated correctly? What if it was just all over the place, right? My wife, her name's Delaney. What if she got her blood pressure taken and it was like 100 points too high? And then my colleague, Renee, at work, got her blood pressure taken and it was 100 points lower than what she'd normally be at, and vice versa. It may look something like this top right Target, right? And this is not an advertisement for Target. I'm just using Target as an example. But very much unreliable. And overall, on average, if we measured my wife, my colleagues, all the people in the study, because it was so unreliable, the average is actually pretty close to what's correct. Do you see how that could work? If we averaged all of these measures right here, it's probably going to end up somewhere in the middle. However, the unreliability is problematic. In the other case, if our blood pressure monitor was consistently measuring blood pressure too high, they would not even out, right? It would not even out. All of our measurements would be way up here. And this is thus an example of being unreliable and invalid. Now, if our blood pressure monitor only measured, hypertension or whatever, blood pressure, a little bit off, and didn't kind of span some of the area, but was consistent in that, then we might actually believe it has reliability, but we may not know that it's really not measuring the true blood pressure of our study participants, right? So what we mean by this is, how do we know if what we get in a research program, how do we know that it's accurate? Well, we tend to measure for things called validity and reliability. Reliability, what if instead of getting your blood pressure taken once when you came to the doctor, what if they took it twice with 2 different machines, right? That's called test-retest reliability. What if having someone who is a subject matter expert come in and look over our blood pressure monitor, they would pretty quickly tell us that, oh gosh, this is not measuring what we intend for it to measure. That is called content validity. Concurrent validity would be if we were using multiple blood pressure monitors at the same time, and all of them were consistently correct or incorrect, right? Predictive validity is using data to predict the future. Basically doing one study, let's just say we did a study on hypertension and maternal health, and then we did another study 6 months later. Well, our results from the first study should inform the results of the second study, unless something crazy happens, right? And if the results are all wrong, then we would not have predictive validity. However, if the results were very much in line in terms of weight, age, all these other factors, then we could say that we have predictive validity. And then criterion just makes sure that we know exactly what we are measuring, right? We're measuring blood pressure. We know how to do it, why to do it, how it matters. Y'all, that's a lot, again, on one slide, but because we're not focusing on this for the majority of the course, I like to always kind of give a quick frame of reference. Does that help? Okay, cool. So when we talk about data, again, the way that we collect it impacts how we analyze it. So our correlational types of data that we're looking at is always trying to measure relationships. In this type of a study, and you're going to read a lot of different studies over the course of the semester, you'll come into contact with some correlational designs. The purpose of correlational studies is to look at the relationship between something and something else. I gave you an example of a correlational outcome at the very, very beginning of this spiel. Do you remember what it was? Say it, Laura. Sorry, I can't.
Ice cream and temperature. Ice cream sales.
Yeah. Perfect. Yep. So that is just one example of many types of relationships. Correlational studies that are just one predictor, one outcome, right? One independent, one dependent variable. Pretty common. However, you're probably going to come into contact with multiple predictors during your studies. You might actually run into studies where, based on some other factor that's not even included in your study, it could be affecting it. That's kind of like saying, I think there's a correlational relationship between ice cream sales and home break-ins. Ice cream sales and burglary. Well, there is, I promise. So if you go out and buy a bunch of ice cream this weekend, better lock your doors, people. You never know. No, I'm joking. It is purely because there are common factors between when people buy ice cream and generally when crime occurs in our world. The hotter it gets, the more likely we are to see petty theft and those sorts of things. It is not something I can explain, but it is something that the data show. Summer months typically have higher crime rates. Some people attribute it to the sun being out longer. Some people attribute it to people being out longer outside, summer months, drinking alcohol, that sort of, I don't know. There's a lot of ways around it. But the idea of understanding what types of data we're looking at and using to do either relationship measurements or some other types of analysis like experimental analysis is a little different. So what we mean by experiments in the pure scientific method is you typically have control groups, right? Groups that are not given the vaccine, right? I mean, we've heard about, I really am just completely distraught every day about all the things that are happening in this pandemic. But one thing I'll tell you is that more and more people now probably understand the rigorous scientific method, because there's been so much talk about control groups, right? Validation, experimentation. When we see experimental studies be done, what we're trying to find is what type of variation occurs between those who receive a placebo, which is essentially something that should not affect them, versus people that do receive some sort of stimulus, whether that's money to participate in a study, whether it's maybe going back to your example earlier, Kara, about changing people's mindsets, right? What if a stream of commercials during the prime news hour, the prime television show, or gosh, Netflix? What if Netflix had commercials? What if those kinds of commercials that people could see would actually help shape their opinions? We know that that's the case, right? I want to go out and adopt a puppy every day because of the ASPCA. I mean, come on, who doesn't? But it's definitely, the idea here is that there are different methods to what we can do, of course, with the data we have, but also there are limitations in all aspects of any type of data analysis. So, for example, in terms of just basic data analysis, I want to introduce a couple of concepts to you. Number one, this idea of a frequency distribution is simply telling me how many occurrences happened within a given sample or population. So if we took the temperature of everybody in this class, generally, the idea goes that the average human body is about 98.6. I can send you a podcast that will blow your mind. I see someone's excited. Go ahead, please, take away from my moment here. Go ahead, Kara.
No, I have nothing helpful to add. I just happened to read an article that addressed the origins of the 98.6 and the fellow who did that, and the validity, that's not the right word, but the accuracy of the thermometers that he was using at the time. Fascinating.
Yeah, that was a long time ago that they measured 98.6. Here's a fun fact. The average body temperature that we know right now, and it does vary by where you live in the world, is around 98.2. And I don't know if anyone has, you probably recognize that thing, right? The little handheld thermometer. Those are really not accurate. I was about a 97 one day when I went to go throw some pottery. So it was pretty humorous. But no, the human body temperature generally falls along what we call a normal curve, right? Do you see this curve shape in the frequency distribution there? That we're going to get more into what a normal curve is a little bit later on, but essentially it is a frequency distribution that has a peak and then trails off. This type of distribution where we do frequencies is typically either what we call like normal or has some sort of slightly positive or slightly negative skewness. And then that's one way to describe the ends, the right and the left side. We talk about kurtosis in distributions that are either very, very tall and skinny or very, very short and flat. So platycardic is like a plateau, okay? Leptocardic, the way I like to think about this, is good luck leaping over it, right? It's kind of a sharp increase. Think about the number of COVID cases last week, right? It's like, kind of goes up. Here is my, really, I try to make this as simple as possible. Student quiz grades, first quiz of the semester. Student quiz grades are usually pretty low. I'm not talking about this class, I'm talking about sociology. But generally my student, and this is true data, accurate data, the first quiz grade in my sociology class, because they're learning how to take the quiz. That's, again, one of the latent functions of being a student, is that one of the things that you learn as you go through the class is how to succeed in the class. So here, this is called positive skewness. Positive skewness. You see how the tail runs positively out towards the 10, right? That's where it's being skewed to the positive direction. An example of negative skewness, though, is actually their first test. This is their first quiz, comes before the first test, but once they realize how to succeed in my class and how to study, their student test grades are actually skewed negatively. You actually see the tail moving into the lower areas, which means fewer students are scoring. We definitely do not have a normal distribution with regards to my students' grades. And in fact, I'd be surprised if any college class nowadays has a normal distribution, with C being the average. Grade inflation, but as well as the mission of higher education has changed. We're not here to kick kids out or to, weed students out of, like, chemistry and biology, but we're here to help them succeed. So anyway, that's my spiel on grade inflation. When we think about the measures of central tendency, which is really kind of the crux of what we're doing in this week and next week, we describe measures of central tendency using terms called mode, median, and average. The mode is the score that receives the highest frequency. So, in terms of quiz grades, what score is the mode? Kara says 4. Who else says 4? Is that a 5, Laura?
Oh no, that was a hand raise.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so yeah, 4. Boom. It has 9 students that received a 4. What's the mode for the student test grade?
$19.
19, exactly, Pratane. Then student temperatures, the mode is, in this example, 98.6. 96. Yep, good job, Julianne. Just saw it. Sorry. I had my eyes on the other side of the screen. Yes, 4 and 19. So you notice the mode here is 98.6 again. Now, when we talk about another measure of central tendency, the median is like essentially the median on a highway, right? It's right there in the middle. So what you have to do to calculate the median is you have to know how many total number of test takers there were, and then figure out what that middle value was. So what is the median for the quiz grades?
Seven.
Well, Beth, is that what you said? 7?
Yeah, I said 7.
Oh, okay. I didn't know who said it. Yeah, so how many total students do we have taking the quiz?
Does that matter though? Because I thought, I previously thought you take the highest and lowest number and divide them by 2.
Ah, no, because what if we had 20 students that all score a 4, and only one that scores a 10, and only one that scores a 9, and everybody else scores a 4. Essentially, it's where the middle number is in the distribution. So let's do the math real fast. 4 students scored 0, right? 9 students scored 4, so that is 13. 7 scored 6. 3 scored 7, right? So now we're at 23. And then 4 scored 8 and 9, so that's 27. And then 1 scored 10. So we have 28 students, right? If you count just the number of students represented on the bars, right? That should be 28, I think. 28 divided by 2 is 14, right? So you definitely divide by 2, but you don't divide the highest and the lowest. You divide the number of students, the N, right? The number of students by 2. And because it's 28, that means the 14th person in the distribution is your median, okay? So we've got 4 students at 0, 9 students at 14, and then 7 students at 7. So, I'm sorry, at 6, apologies, at 6. So what that means is we've hit that number 14 right after we went through 0 and 4. So the median is actually 6. It is the middlemost value. The middlemost value. Does that make sense? It's much, much easier to see this in a spreadsheet, right? And having student 1, student 2, student 3, all the way through student 30. But this is when I tell people visualizing data is good, but it doesn't tell us everything. So just wanted to give you all an example of how to find the median just by looking at a chart. It's definitely not the easiest thing to do, but nonetheless, it's very doable. Let's move into one like student temperatures. What's the median value for student temperatures?
It looks to still be 98.6.
It is 98.6. What is the mode for temperatures?
Still 98.6.
98.6, right? So this is how I want you to think about frequency distributions. If you have a normal distribution where the data are even on both sides, like this one with the temperature, the median, the mode, and even the average number, the average temperature are all three the same. When we have skewness, it affects the measurement of median, mode, and average. Same thing with student test grades, right? So there we go. See. There, when we say the mean, it's essentially just the sum of all the scores divided by the number of scores. So the average score of student temperatures is 98.6 because it's completely balanced on either side. The average quiz grade, however, is probably a little bit less than 4. I'm sorry, a little bit more than, sorry, I'm a little visually dyslexic tonight. It's a little bit more than 4, right? Because we see the tails kind of going off to the positive side. Student test grades, the mode is 19. The median is probably somewhere around 17 or 18. And the average is probably somewhere around 16, 17, or 18. I could do it really quick, but I'm just giving you an example. The way we tend to talk about frequency distributions and why it's so important in this class is because if we can't talk about the overall characteristics of our data, we can't really describe much beyond that, right? So we have to start from a very descriptive level and then work our way through. So when we calculate a mean, it allows us to make sense of a lot of other things. If we can't calculate an average, and remember, we cannot really average, we can't average nominal data, right? We can only do frequency distributions like this. But when we talk about the average, it allows us to calculate variance, deviation, right? Any kind of deviance away from the mean. So if our average is 98.6 for student temperatures, and let's just say, you know, the next step up is 98.8, well, then that's a variance of about 0.2 degrees, right? What we tend to see is this notion of variance is used to calculate what's called standard deviation. And all standard deviation means is the average amount of variance within a distribution of data, If, let's just say, we had our first exam and everybody in this class scored between a 19 and a 20, right? If everybody scored between a 19 and 20 out of 20, don't be nervous, but that would mean that the variance is very small, right? Because the variation away from the average is, I mean, the average is probably going to be 19 point something, right? Or and so the variance will be very small if everyone on the distribution was between 19 and 20. And so the standard deviation will be very, very low. If all of you scored at least 1 point away from each other, right? Someone scored a 12, someone scored a 13, someone scored a 14, someone scored a 15. The standard deviation would be much higher because the variation of each individual score away from the mean would essentially sum up to be a pretty big number. And so just as a quick introduction to what we mean by mean and standard deviation is we use these scores to then measure how close our items are to each other or how close data is to each other when we look at relationships, right? If, let's just say, if the temperature of our outdoor temperature went up by 1 degree and we saw ice cream sales increase by $1,000. What if we saw the temperature increase by 5 degrees, but we saw ice cream sales increase by $10,000, right? That's not a linear increase, right? 1,000 per degree would be linear, but $10,000 just for 5 degrees would actually kind of spike it up a little bit more. It's a way of really looking at how things can be described and generally interpreted in our world. People understand this idea of what we mean by average. People typically do not understand what we mean by standard deviation. I'm just going to put it out there. If I was in a board meeting and I talked about our average retention rates across our institution, my board understands that. But if I told them what the standard deviation was, I would probably get some blank stares, right? They may or may not know. So the quick and easy way of calculating standard deviation is here, and this is actually a screenshot from the textbook, taking the number of friends of the author. He did a study of people and found out the number of friends that they had. He found out that the average was 95. So what he then did was he calculated the deviance by subtracting the number of friends, by the mean. Basically saying 22 friends minus 95, 98 friends minus 95, etc. The deviance then is summed to basically the entire amount of deviance is summed together. Well, then you square that deviance, right? You square that deviance just to remove all the negatives, but also to standardize it. And essentially, those are, I mean, I know you kind of have to get into the data to really kind of see this, but those are the steps to better understand and interpret standard deviation. I've been told that I explain it much better than most people have learned it the first time. But the easiest way for me to tell y'all to start off with thinking about data, frequency distributions, and standard deviation is to remember that if the data are closer together, you're going to have a small standard deviation. If the data are farther apart, like this is, like the number of friends, we expect to see a pretty high standard deviation. So what we would normally do here, and I'm sorry I don't have it on my slide, I'll make sure to get it added, because we square the deviance, right? We would then take the square root and determine what the standard deviation is. So we are right here at time. We've got a few minutes left. I can't do that. I'm sorry. I can't go back to Canvas. I was trying to go back into Canvas. What I want to do is just kind of show you what the in-class example is. The in-class example this week is all about COVID, just because it's pretty relevant still. I got my data from GitHub, Ken. So Ken, do you get your data from the New York Times GitHub account?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. All right, so they've got it out there in a lot of different ways. This is just number of cases by day and the number of deaths by day from January 21 all the way up until, 2 days ago. So how does everybody feel in terms of comfort level with Excel? I see two heads shaking. What about my colleagues that their cameras off? Moderate. Okay, good. Well, we don't have time because and by the way, I will always be respectful of your time and we will always end on time, okay? We only have 5 minutes left. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and record or keep recording after the class, or at least maybe do a separate recording of this example and make sure I put it out there first thing tomorrow. Since we can't do this lecture live next week, I want to make sure that you can at least see it in order to prepare for your assignment, which is going to be about looking at the number of flights. Looking at frequencies of the number of commercial flights over time. So with that, we are just 4 minutes. I'd hate to get too deep. Can I give y'all 4 minutes of your life back? Okay. By the way, I also, being the first course, I will also tell you, I'm happy to give you more of my time and answer any questions you have. If you want to ever stick around after class, because it's either easier to just stick around than it is to maybe get here early, I'm happy to do so. Just let me know before you jump off that you want to chat. So with that, I will walk through this. Again, please know that I did not intend to be on vacation for the second week of course, but I had to book that flight well before I knew what day this class was going to be. So I apologize for next week. Thus, I will also let you know when I have access to Canvas, because then you will receive more resources from me. I promise you the Likert scale, and I believe I've already got this out there, but I could be wrong. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Yes, teacher. So when you download the data, is it Excel or is a CSV file?
I downloaded it in as a CSV file, but I opened it up in Excel for y'all today.
Okay, understand.
How do you do it?
Yeah, I'll use a CSV file and I'll put it on the. I'll use a Python to open it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. I might have you demonstrate that for us next time. How does that sound, Ken?
Awesome.
Does anybody else here use Python? Smidge? Okay. Cool. Okay. Nice. I'll be honest. Python is not part of this course. The reason why is because we, when I was talking to the broader program folks, it was understood that people have access to Excel, right? It is generally like democratic in a way that a lot of people have access to it. But also SPSS is similar to SAS, and many institutions have contracts with SPSS. And so for those who wish to further their education, learning a statistical package is a goal of this program. So definitely wanted to introduce y'all to at least one. All right, thank you so much for coming tonight and being a part of this course. I look forward to working with you this semester. If anyone wants to stick around, just feel free to stick around and ask any other questions you may have. I'll talk to you all next week, or actually I'll talk to you all before then, send you a video, but let me know if you need anything in the meantime. Okay. Good night.
Thank you. It's a great class.
Thank you.
Thank you.